Okay, well, it looks like our second guest, Garnet, is with me now, and let me say hello. Hi, Garnet, is that you?
Yes, it is, Karen. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much. Let me get the speakerphone off, and thank you for calling in early. I'm not sure what happened with Maury. We confirmed yesterday he was all ready to go, and suddenly he's not here, so I appreciate you calling in a bit early tonight. Perfect timing.
No problem.
So, listeners, let me start by introducing Garnet to you by way of his bio, and then we're going to jump into our show topic, Revelations on Life and the Afterlife. We're going to talk about an interesting life experience that Garnet had. He met a homeless man named Albert, who actually turned out to be his spirit guide in disguise. So, Garnet Schulhauser practiced corporate law with 2 large firms in Calgary, Canada for 34 years before retiring to Vancouver Island in 2008, where he now lives with his wife, Kathy, and a little dog, Abby. He grew up on a small farm in Saskatchewan and attended law school in Saskatoon before moving to Calgary to begin his legal career. Although he did not begin writing until after retiring from his legal practice, he now pursues his new career with a passion. And in his spare time, he enjoys golfing, kayaking, and long hikes in the forest with Abby. He takes great delight in family gatherings with his 2 sons, Blake and his wife, Lauren, in Colon, and looks forward to the arrival of his first grandchild in August of this year. Garnet's life changed dramatically one day in 2007 when he was confronted on the street by a homeless man named Albert. Over the next few years, he had a series of conversations with Albert, who was actually a wise spirit guide in disguise, who disclosed startling new truths about life, death, the afterlife, and God. Albert answered all of life's big questions about who we are, our purpose for being on earth, and what happens to us after we die. Albert's revelations were inspiring, uplifting, and comforting, and flew in the face of almost everything that Christian holy man had been preaching for centuries. So, what did Garnet do? He wrote a book called Dancing on a Stamp at Albert's request so that these revelations would be available to everyone. So, Garnet, what a story. You have to realize how unique it probably is, don't you?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of comments from people that they're all sort of amazed and astounded at how I met Albert. I was, in fact, amazed myself when it happened, so it was quite a life-changing event for me. But, it's quite a unique story for sure.
Well, first, I was really intrigued by the title of your book, Dancing on a Stamp. Is that a saying that I'm not familiar with? Where does that come from?
Well, it actually came from Albert, and during the course of our conversations, and he gave it to me as a phrase in terms of some advice he was giving me. I'm not sure I want to disclose exactly where it came from because it's all laid out in the last chapter of the book.
Ah, okay.
So I'd rather not
yes.
spoil the surprise for people, but the phrase came from Albert, and it has a special meaning between him and I, and but not in the context of a title for a book. And then when I had finished my manuscript, I was sort of searching around for a sort of interesting title, and this phrase kept on popping up in my mind. And so after a while, I asked Albert, who I was still in communication with, I said, how about Dancing on a Stamp for the title for my book? And he said, yeah, that's great, go for it. And so that's where it came from. But the origin of that phrase is in the last chapter of my book, and I'd rather not spoil everyone's surprise. If they read the book,
no problem.
It'll all fit together. Yeah.
Okay, no spoiler then. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, so it sounds like you still communicate with Albert?
Yes, I do. Yeah, we've kept in touch. I was in sort of regular communication with him when I was writing my manuscript because a lot of the stuff is in my book. It came from him, and I'd have to go back constantly to ask questions and sort of fill in some of the details. And then after my manuscript was finished, we sort of, or at least on my part, because he was always there when I wanted to contact him, I sort of was busy doing other things, promoting my book, and so we didn't get into as much contact. But I'm just about to start, or actually I have started my second book, and I'm going to be in more regular contact with Albert now because he's going to be a major part of book two.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get into all of that. This has been what, since 2007? So what? That's more than 5 years. 5 or 6
Yes.
years. There's been this relationship. So, all right. Let's just start at the beginning. How did you meet Albert, this homeless guy? Does he live on the street or in a shelter, or what's the deal?
Well, how I met him was that I was practicing law in Calgary at the time in a large law firm, and one sunny afternoon in May of 2007, I decided to get a breath of fresh air. So I took a walk on the street outside of our building, and it's a street that's a pedestrian mall, so it was closed off to vehicular traffic, and people just stroll up and down there. So I was going for a stroll in my navy pinstripe suit, looking every bit like a typical straight-laced stuffed shirt corporate lawyer. So I was strolling down the street with my head in the clouds, sort of thinking about files and clients and everything else. And all of a sudden, this homeless man pops out of nowhere, stands right in front of me, and stops me in my tracks. So he looked like a typical homeless person. He had long, stringy, greasy hair and a scraggly beard, and his clothes looked like he'd been sleeping in them for weeks. And usually what I would do when I met these people on the street or other people like him is I'd make a quick sidestep and go around, because most often they're asking for money. But this guy was different. He was very different. He had amazing, sparkling, dazzling blue eyes that shone like two little blue stars. And his gaze was, as I stood there, his gaze was just penetrating deep within me. It was like he was focused right down to the depths of my soul. And I felt like he knew everything about me. He knew everything I'd ever said or done in my life. He knew all my hopes and aspirations, all my fears and anxieties, and he even knew my deepest and darkest secrets, things that I'd never even told my wife. So there I was, standing there. So you learned
this over the course of time, I assume?
No, I sensed this all immediately. It was just a feeling I had. It was just he didn't tell me. He didn't have to tell me. It just, like, I just sort of knew. It was like an intuitive wave that hit me, and I knew this guy was, gazing right through me, and he knew everything about me, even though we had never met before. So it was just a strong feeling, and hard to explain, but I just knew that he knew everything about me.
So let me ask you, Garnet, were you sort of metaphysically oriented before this, or was this really just a big surprise?
Well, I wasn't. I had read a lot of metaphysical and spiritual books. I wouldn't say I was overly spiritual. So I was, I guess I was surprised. I was certainly surprised at the circumstances that this homeless person could be a spirit guide in disguise, or that he would stop me and immediately have all this knowledge about me. That very much surprised me, for sure.
So
and anyway, to carry on, if I can just carry on with the rest of how I met him.
Sorry.
So I had this feeling he knew everything about me, and even though I felt sort of naked and exposed, the reason I didn't sort of turn tail and run was because at the same time his eyes were sending me this amazing wave of pure unconditional love that was just infusing my whole body with a sense of peace and security. So that was the good part of it. I didn't mind being sort of peered into by this man because he was sending me this great wave of love. And so I stood there for a while just basking in this unconditional love. And then he broke my reverie by saying, why are you here? And then he just took off and went into a store. I went in there to find him. Couldn't find him anywhere. Walked up down the street for a while, and he just was nowhere to be seen. And so the next day I thought, I better go back and see if I can find this guy, because he was just so intriguing. So I went back the next day, and after walking around for a while on the small, I finally found him sitting on a bench. And I walked up to him, and I sat down and I said, why did you ask me that question yesterday, and who are you? And he said, because I'm here because you've been asking questions, a lot of questions all your life, and I'm here to give you the answers and to help you on your journey. So that was sort of the start of our conversation. And initially I was a bit skeptical. I was, despite all this amazing love coming from this man, my lawyer brain kicked in, and I said to him, well, how can you help me? Because you can't even seem to help yourself. You look like you've been sleeping in the street for weeks, and you smell like a dead fish. And so he just gave me a big smile, and he said, well, looks can be deceiving. He said, you look like you're a successful corporate lawyer with everything under control, but we both know that that's just a facade. So he said you could go back to your office and see if you can find your answers, all these life question answers or questions you've been asking. See if you can find the answers to those questions in all those emails back in your office, or you can sit down and take a chance with me. So I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I sat down and we started our conversation.
Okay.
And from that point on, it went on for several months. Now, he early on, he told me that he was actually one of my spirit guides in disguise, and he was just disguised as a homeless man. And in fact, he told me that I was the only one who could see him as the homeless man, and that to everyone else he was invisible. So if somebody was strolling down the street that day, they would have seen me sitting alone on that bench talking to myself.
Now, did you ever test that?
I didn't, no, because he only showed up for the first 3 meetings as a homeless man, and after that, he was just a voice in my head. We would communicate telepathically. And he said that he only showed up as the homeless man initially just to get my attention and to ease me into the conversation, because if he had just started talking to me as a voice in my head, I probably would have thought I was losing my mind or going crazy. So
sure.
it was a gimmick. And then after I was comfortable talking to him, then he just lost his disguise. So no, I don't know if there was no way for me to test it, because when I was talking to him, I didn't bother stopping people to say, "Can you see my buddy over here?" It was very intense sort of conversation, and I was sort of very focused on what we were doing.
And you didn't know he was going to disappear
I can't say that for sure, but that's what he told me, though. Sorry?
And you didn't know he was going to disappear, so either. I mean, if
no, I didn't know he was going to disappear. I thought he was. To me, he was like a real flesh and bones person.
Right.
And in fact, I touched him and shook his hand and that sort of thing, and he felt just like a very real person. So I had no reason to believe that he would cease to be a homeless man, after the first 3 meetings. So
you haven't seen him in the flesh since meeting number 3?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't. He's just a voice in my head. When I want to contact him, I just go into a quiet place and sort of go into a late meditation, and I'll just say, Albert, are you there? And he'll always say, yeah, I'm right here. What would you like?
Okay. Well, so what would you say were some of the most significant revelations Albert made to you?
Well, he said, just to give a brief summary of, we talked about a lot of things, but the main things that struck me were that he said that all of us were all eternal souls that will exist forever, and that we're all created by the source, or as some people would refer to it as the creator or God or all that is. And we're like beings, in our true form, we're like beings of energy that spun out from the source, like his analogy was like sparks of light from the central sun. And we were created by the source to go out and explore the universe. And because we're connected to the source, everything that we experience, the source experiences. So the source is basically sending us out to help the source experience and learn everything that it has created in the universe.
So that would mean pain as well as pleasure.
I'm sorry?
That would mean pain as well as pleasure.
Oh, sure. And the source is quite... the source basically is open to every experience that possibly exists. So it can be pain, it can be pleasure, it could be whatever. And so whatever we experience, the source experiences. So then, in response to my question to Albert, like, why am I here? Why am I in this human body here right now? He said, because all souls choose to incarnate on Earth. Everyone who's here has chosen to come here. That the source didn't make us or didn't choose for us, and no one else did. So we all came here voluntarily so that we can learn and experience what the Earth has to offer. And that's just part of our evolution as a soul. And before we came, we each prepared a life plan. And the life plan set out the major circumstances and events of our lives, things like our names, our parents, our siblings, our relatives, the place we're born, the schools we go to, things like that, and then various other major circumstances. We prepare those before we're born. But because once we get here, because we forget what was in our life plans or that we even had one, and because we have free will here, Albert said, we very often go off course and take a wrong turn. And so the last major point that he said, and I can go back and fill in some of the details on that. The last major point is that, contrary to what a lot of organized religions say, the source does not make rules for us to follow. The source does not control the events in our lives, and the source will not judge us or punish us after we die for what we did on earth. So everyone goes back to the spirit side, no matter what they did on earth, which basically means even the bad guys like the murderers and the terrorists, they all go back to the spirit side after their physical bodies die. And the spirit side...
All right, hold that thought, because you've got a lot of questions, jumping out at me. Okay, so that sounds like then there's no punishment. So there's no hell, there's no purgatory, none of that stuff.
Exactly.
So what was your religion, or what is your religion? I mean, were the things that Albert was telling you any way alike or unlike what you believed in your spirituality before Albert came along?
Well, I was raised as a Roman Catholic in a very religious Roman Catholic family, but by the time I reached my teenage years, I had already sort of questioned and challenged some of the beliefs and rules of the Catholic Church. And then by the time I was in my 30s, I had already sort of more or less drifted away and had sort of rejected a lot of what they had taught me or what I'd learned as a child. And so then for a number of years, I was sort of drifting in no man's land because I had rejected one set of beliefs and I was searching for another set. So I read a lot of, dozens of books on various religions and spiritual books and metaphysical books trying to find sort of the answers I was searching for. And I kept on asking myself all the big questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What happens to me after I die? And then Albert showed up and he gave me his answers, which really rang true to me. And I just firmly know that what he told me is true, and I've really signed on to them. So what he told me basically conflicts with the Catholic beliefs in many, many places.
Right.
But I'd already sort of rejected a lot of those anyway, and I was looking for new answers. And he gave me the new answers that just felt right to me.
So, all right, so let's talk about the source a bit here. How does he describe the source? Would it be how we grow up thinking about God or goddess? What did he tell you about the source?
Well, the source is just, basically, it's sort of a concept that's hard for us to understand, but he said the source is the sum total of everything in the universe. The source created everything, and everything in the universe, including us, humans, we're all connected to the source. We're all connected to each other and to everything else. It's like the Lynn McTaggart's The Field. If you've read her book, it's sort of we're all hooked up together, and at the center of all this is the source. So the source doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a physical body. It's just like a huge center of pure energy, I guess is how Albert described it. And we all originated from that source. We all just sort of spun out like sparks, and we went out to explore the universe. And if we want to return to the source someday, we can. But in the meantime, we're just supposed to be out here having fun and sending messages back to the source about our experiences.
So does that mean, where does prayer fit in? Does the source hear our prayers and help us? Well,
not in the sort of the religious sense, because the source will hear our prayers, of course, but the source isn't there to manipulate events. So the source isn't there to answer your prayers or to do things to you if you happen to misbehave. The source just sort of stays back out of it and just enjoys the experience, if you can use that word. So whether it's a good experience or bad, it all gets reflected back to the source. So when you pray, what you're really doing is you're sending thoughts out into the universe, and those thoughts, all thoughts are powerful. So if you pray for something, those thoughts have their own energy, and if you have enough, if you send enough of them out and have enough people praying for the same thing, that can just have a positive effect or get you the result you want just because of your thoughts. But it's not the source doing it as such. It's just the way the universe works that the source created.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I can imagine that would be comforting to some people and terrifying to some people too, to think that we do it of our own power as opposed to someone there hearing our prayer.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, as Albert said, I mean, we create our own realities on Earth. It's not the source manipulating things or pulling strings like some master puppeteer. We create our own realities because first of all, we've set up our lives through our life plan, so that by the time we were born, a lot of the things are already there that we planned, like who our parents are and where we're born and so on. We can't change that. But then because we have free will, we can do things that are either in our life plan or maybe they're not in our life plan. And because we don't remember it, we can sort of go on the right path or the wrong path, based upon what we have in our life plans. And because we don't remember what's in our life plans, of course, we have no real idea right now of knowing whether we're on course or we're off course.
So does that mean there's the only destiny, so to speak, is what we chose for ourselves before we started embarking on this life?
Yeah, that's the only destiny, and that was and the life plans we created, we did ourselves, and and obviously in consultation with the others who play a major role in our life. So that, for example, your parents and your siblings and your spouse and your children, on the other side, they all have to agree to be part of your life, and you have to agree to be part of theirs. So it's a matter of cooperation. But that's sort of our life plans don't determine everything in our lives, because they only hit the major points, and all the little details in between we fill in as we live our lives on Earth. And so, it's not fatalism. Our lives aren't predetermined by us, and they're not predetermined by the source, and we sort of make up our own script or write our own script as we go along.
So that means if we have a hard life, say we have a life of suffering, or we get cancer, or we live in poverty, or we were killed in a concentration camp. I mean, we chose those things for the most part?
Yeah, for the most part, you choose the major things. Now, it doesn't always work out exactly as you planned it, because of your free will, you may take a slightly different course. But all those major points, you basically had planned for them before you're born, and you planned for them because you wanted to experience those things to either learn a lesson or to help your evolution, your growth and evolution as a soul. And so you came here to experience those things. So somebody has a hard life. Fact of the matter is, you shouldn't feel like you're a victim of the universe or of the source, because basically you chose this life for yourself, and you likely don't understand why you did it, and you probably would wish you had chosen a different life. But according to Albert, it made good sense when you were on the spirit side before you were born, and that's what you planned. And when you get back to the spirit side, it'll all make sense again. So we just have to have faith that whatever we plan for ourselves, we have good reason to do it.
So then we constantly keep reincarnating then. So reincarnation is part of this. Absolutely.
And what Albert said is that, you can come incarnate on Earth as many times as you want, and you can stop any time you want. And if you choose to just take a break and spend a bunch of time on the spirit side, you can do that too. The fact is, nobody makes you do it, and no matter whether you want to have 20 lives or 850 lives, it's entirely up to you. And it's really a matter of sort of what you've experienced, up to that point in time, and what you need for your evolution. That really determines your decision as to how many incarnations you want to have.
So tell me more about what it's like on the other side.
Well, I did ask Albert a lot of questions about this because what he described the spirit side, I said that sounds a lot like heaven. And when I was a kid growing up, they said heaven was a great place and you'd be in the presence of God, but they didn't really say anything else about it. And I had always had this vision of people in heaven sitting on fluffy white clouds and listening to angels play harp music. But he said no. He said it's really quite an amazing place. We don't have physical bodies there, so we're like beings of energy. So we don't need to eat, sleep, or drink, or breathe, or procreate, or any of those things. And he says it's a very interesting and challenging existence, because we can do all kinds of things that we might have liked to do on Earth, and like recreational activities and sporting activities. We can go to concerts and lectures. We can take on projects over there to help newly arrived souls back from their incarnations, or to help with others prepare life plans. And then if we want to, we can explore the universe. We can actually go as in spirit form as energy beings and explore throughout the universe, explore all the many millions of planets and life forms and everything else. And if we want to, he says we can choose to incarnate on Earth. And here on Earth we can incarnate as rocks, as plants, as animals, humans, sort of whatever. And again, it's entirely our choice. But he did say that Earth is one of the toughest schools in the universe. And so all the souls who come here are really brave souls, or else they have a lot of experience, because he said it's a really tough school. In fact, he said that the Earth is really the only place you can incarnate where you don't remember where you came from or what is in your life plan. So it's really a tough school.
So does that mean there are other places? I mean, I guess I want to say, is there life on other planets? I mean, did he say something like that? Oh
yeah, he said that there's millions and millions of life forms on millions and millions of different planets. He said it's almost endless. He said and some of the life forms are more primitive than humans, and a lot of them are way more advanced technologically, and they can, with space travel and time travel and all that sort of thing. So he says it's just a huge variety of life forms, and when we get back to the spirit side, we can incarnate into any of those life forms if we choose. And so it's really a sort of a vast universe that we can explore, either in a physical body by incarnating into one of these life forms, or just by traveling around in spirit form. So yes, there is millions of life forms, and he even said that I mean, all the people that talk about UFOs, and he said, well, absolutely, those UFOs are really spacecraft from some of these civilizations. They've been visiting Earth for quite a long time, and they're for real, and those are just other life forms in the universe. So absolutely there are.
So I don't mean to hurt your feelings with this question, but I want to just ask you: has anyone questioned you about if maybe Albert was a creation of your own because you feared death, like we all do?
Nobody's ever asked me that, and I'm not insulted by the question. But no, that's some people might say that's what happened. But in my own view, I think he's a very, very real spirit. To me, he was a very real homeless man. And now he's a very real spirit who's speaking to me when I talk to him. And I don't think it's an invention on my mind. Maybe I'm fooling myself. Who knows? I guess after I die, I'll know for sure. But in the meantime, I feel very confident that he's a real spirit, and what he's telling me is the way the universe works.
So do you think he was an angel? I mean, are there really angels, or is that just sort of a Christian concept that we just as well throw out?
Well, he didn't really get into labels, and he didn't really talk about angels and archangels and that sort of thing. He just referred to the people that weren't incarnated as being spirits or souls. So I didn't really get into that with him, other than he did refer to a special group of spirits that he said we sometimes refer to as guardian angels, and their function is to make sure that they watch over us and make sure we don't die a premature death on Earth. And what that relates to is that, and this is one of the things that surprised me the most about his revelations, is that he said no one on Earth dies by accident. We die when our soul chooses to leave the incarnation. And so, which was quite a surprise to me. And I said, so Albert, do you mean to say that when a plane crashes and all 300 people on board die, that all those souls, all 300 souls, chose to leave at the same time? And he said, yeah, absolutely. He says, there is no accident. He said, when we prepare our life plans, we all build in 5 or 6 exit points in terms of a place where we can, exit our incarnations. And as we live our lives, our soul makes the absolute final decision on which exit point we take. And no one else can interfere with that. And so, of course, our human minds don't know what our soul's doing in the background, but our souls are the ones who choose to, when our physical bodies are going to die. And so the reason that the guardian angels came up was I said to him, well, how is it that if I have free will and I don't know what's in my life plan, and everyone around me has free will and they don't know what's in their life plans, what happens if you get a clash of free wills and something unforeseen happens that might lead me to die accidentally, even though my soul wasn't ready to go. And he said, well, that's where the guardian angels come in, because if they can see that those events might happen, they will actually step in and intervene to make sure that my incarnation doesn't end before my soul is ready to go.
Well,
so those are the only reference to angels that he made were these guardian angels, and the rest of the time he called everyone else, souls and spirits. But I'm sure there's more to it than that.
So do we all have somebody like Albert? I mean, yeah, you just said we all have, guardian angels, but I'm wondering, do we all have spirit guides that we could potentially talk to, or did he break some rules or something to communicate with you?
Well, we all have spirit guides. He said we all have 2 or 3 throughout our lives, and they sometimes change as your life progresses. But he said, in this case, it was a very one-off thing for him to communicate with me directly. He said generally our spirit guides communicate with us in a very much more subtle way, so that they will send you intuitive messages, or you get a whisper in your mind, or you get a gut feeling, or a coincidental event happens around you. Those are the usual way for them to communicate with us. And the trouble for most of us is that we don't always hear those messages because we're too busy and our minds are too cluttered with our day-to-day activities. And so the challenge for most humans who don't have this direct communication like I do with Albert is to be able to hear those messages, understand what they mean, and act on them. And they're designed to help us sort of steer our way down our life paths, so that when we come to a fork in the road, they try to coax us down the road that we should be taking, but we don't always hear it, and sometimes we'll take the wrong road. But my communication with Albert is very unusual, and it just he came to me for a special purpose, which was not to tell me what to do with my personal life, but to give me some information and some messages for sort of everyone, and that's why he was talking to me directly. And in fact, he still won't give me personal advice. He just gives me sort of his revelations that he wants everyone to hear. And that's how the book came about, because when I heard some of his amazing stories and tales, I said, Albert, you really should let everyone in the world know this. It might provide them with some comfort and inspiration, and so on. He said, well, I intend to, he said, because you're going to write a book. Which
now, you said in your materials that you sent me that he's critical of organized religion, especially the Catholic Church. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, he didn't want to sort of totally dump on him. I mean, he said like the Catholic Church and other religions, they have some basically good core points, like when they say don't lie, cheat, steal, kill, abuse people. Those points are all good, but he says they get off track because most of the organized religions historically have been led, by men, by religious men, and these men create rules and beliefs for their religion, which they say are coming from God, but in fact they're just created by men, and these men often have their own agendas, and so they get off track. And so, for the most part, what a lot of these leaders want to do is to have power and control over their members. And how they do that is by creating a bunch of rules, which they say God created, and then they tell you that if you break these rules, you've offended God, and you should feel guilty. And so that means you should go to church and make amends and be under the influence and control of the leaders. So that's the guilt factor. They also use fear, which is if you've broken God's rules and you die before you've made amends, then God will punish you and send you to hell. And so they like to control their members with guilt and fear, and all too often they control the people for their own earthly purposes, which has nothing to do with what God wants. In fact, according to Albert, God doesn't want anything. He doesn't make rules. So that's where the religions go off course. And historically, sometimes the religious leaders have invoked, in the name of God, have asked their followers to do some very awful things. I mean, like sacrificing virgins, killing and maiming people during the Inquisition, burning villages during the Crusades, and lately flying airplanes into office towers. That's done in the name of religion, in the name of God, and that's why, in some cases, they've gone so far off course. So that's why Albert said, be wary of organized religions, and be wary of holy men who tell you that what they ask you to do is coming from God. He said, because it's not. God doesn't ask for anything, and He doesn't control our lives, and He doesn't make rules for us, basically. So just be aware of what these guys are telling you.
Okay, so a two-pronged question for you. Has Albert ever talked about really early civilizations, like, say, I don't know, Atlantis or Lemuria, something like that, or maybe something we don't even have a name for? Or has he talked about what is coming in the future? Because so many people seem to think, we're working towards some sort of paradigm shift of enlightenment.
Yeah, we didn't discuss that a lot. I did ask him those questions, and he did acknowledge. We didn't get into detail, but he did acknowledge that humans have had many sort of advanced civilizations on Earth before, like Atlantis and Lemuria, and he said there's a few dozen others that we don't even know about. And he said that the problem with those civilizations is that they got to a certain point, and then they just basically tumbled and disappeared because of human greed and lust for power. And he said that our civilization right now is sort of at a very advanced stage, and we're at a crossroads, and we're at the point where we're either going to sort of, as some people say, make the shift up to the next vibration level, or we're not, and we could end up destroying ourselves and destroying most of our planet if we're not careful. And so he said, yeah, we're definitely at a crossroads, but he didn't get into the much detail on the shift. He said that was a question that would be better asked for the next book, and so I don't have a lot of detail on that, but he did acknowledge that we're at a crossroads and something is coming, and we're going to have to sort of get our act together so that we can make the shift, or we may all perish.
So he didn't say what or when?
No, he didn't. I did ask him, but he said it's not something that I need to know now, and he may tell me later, hopefully for the second book. But he was very, many times I would ask him a question, and he would just tell me that it wasn't the appropriate time for me to know the answer, and he wouldn't answer it. So, and that was one of them. He basically said what I said, and he said any more details will come later.
So these past civilizations, these very ancient ones that, we don't even have comprehension of, are we the people that have been reincarnating over and over and over again? I mean, were we there then?
Some of us have been. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's just because when you're here, you don't remember your past lives, unless you have a past life regression. So you don't really know that you were there or which ones you were in. But and that's just all by design, because you're supposed to not remember those things. But yeah, a lot of us have probably had lives before in Atlantis and Lemuria and some of these other ones, and now we're back here for the second or third or 10th round of a civilization that's nearing the point where it's either going to move forward and advance itself or come crashing down again.
So the people that, the bad guys, the murderers, the terrorists, if there's no judgment after death, there's no penalty for being a horrible person, what kind of, it's like there's no morality tale to tell your kids. How do you explain that to your kids? Because basically you could go through life being this horrible person, and there's no karma. There's no price to pay.
Well, yeah, there sort of is. It's not the price that I was taught as a kid, where you'd go to this awful place called hell. But when you get back to the spirit side, nobody judges you except yourself, because everyone who crosses back over has a life review, and in that life review, you go back over your entire life, and you look to see what all your actions did, whether it caused harm or resulted in good things. And so you go through this life review along with your spirit guides, and you sort of make an analysis. Now, if you're a really bad person and you killed somebody, you're going to feel badly, and you're going to sort of resolve in your own mind to try again and try to do better, because you know that wasn't something that you wanted to do, and it just happened because your free will ran amok or whatever. And So you'll learn from that. It's a learning experience. I mean, Albert basically said, it seems unfair and unjust to people on Earth that a murderer gets to go, to the same place as Mother Teresa. But he said it's not about fairness and justice. That's an earthly concept. And he said when you get to the spirit side, you'll then really understand what life on Earth was all about. He said it's like a play. He said that if you're an actor in a play, and your part in this play is that you will get stabbed by another actor, well, you go through the play, and when the curtain drops, you both go out, leave the theater, and you'll probably go out and have a beer together, and you don't feel any animosity towards the actor who stabbed you in the play because it's just a play.
I see.
And so the victim of the murderer on Earth, when they both get back to the spirit side, the victim doesn't feel any hate or anger or animosity towards the person who killed her or him, on Earth, because they just realize that that's just life on Earth is just like a play. It's not for real, and we're all here to learn lessons. And sometimes we're going to mess up, and we're not going to do it right. But that's why we can keep on coming back as many times as we want until we can learn our lesson and get it right. So that's why. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, all right. So that makes me wonder. I mean, if there are no rules, is there a code of conduct that the source? I don't know if I'm phrasing this properly. Is there a preferred code of conduct, or is it all just about you can be good or you can be bad, and it really doesn't matter in the end because you're just going to sort of get a slap on the wrist and you're just going to start all over again? I mean, I don't know. That somehow is a little kind of a bitter pill to swallow, so to speak. Yeah,
it is hard to accept that. Yeah, I mean, there's no code of conduct that comes from the source, but we sort of set a code of conduct for ourselves before we're born, and so it's not like there's no rules. It's just like we have set some rules and some conduct for ourselves when we're incarnated. Just that we don't always remember everything, but we all have some innate sense of what's right and wrong. Like most of us, regardless if even if we thought there were no rules from God or no rules of the state against killing, if we suddenly discovered that, we wouldn't go across the street and just kill our neighbor.
Right.
There's some things we just know innately aren't right, and that comes from our soul and from what we set for ourselves before we were born.
Okay.
And so there are sort of a code of conduct, but it's not imposed by the source. It's really imposed by ourselves, and then when we finish our lives and we'll look back on what we did and we'll say, oh no, I really messed up there, and I shouldn't have done this and I shouldn't have done that, and then from there you try to learn from your experience and prepare for your next incarnation and try it again, and eventually if you come back often enough you'll get it right.
So let me ask you a little bit about loved ones. Say, for instance, whether you're talking about mother and child or husband and wife. Say you have a really wonderful love relationship on Earth. Can that continue on the other side, or when you're done with this role you're playing, the role doesn't really continue on the spirit side?
No, actually, it does continue to a large extent because most of the people that are close to you in this lifetime, like your spouse, children, parents, and so on, they're generally part of what Albert termed as a soul group. And so on the other side, you sort of travel in a soul group with, he didn't really say they can vary, in size, but your soul group you're very closely connected to, and you will, through various incarnations, you will trade places. So like one time you will be the mother, and the next time you'll be the son, then the next time you'll be the grandpa, and you keep on trading trading roles and trading sexes and jobs and positions and so on, and you travel together so that so your loved ones that you have here right now on Earth, you've probably had previous lives with them, and when you get back to the spirit side, you will still feel, you'll remember who they are, and you'll still feel a close connection with them, and you'll work together with them to work out your next incarnations.
Well,
but there's no spouses as such. You don't have a spouse on the spirit side. Say if you have one here, nobody gets married and there's no procreation, and everyone loves everyone else. But you'll have a special connection with these souls in your soul group.
So in a way, that's comforting then for someone who, who loses a loved one, that they really will be together again.
Yeah, and he exactly. Albert gave the example of a young child being run over in a crosswalk and killed, and he said, it's a shame that the little girl's parents would be angry at God, for saying, why did you take our child from us? And he said, the reality is that the soul of that little girl chose to leave this incarnation on her own volition. It was her choice, and now she's on the spirit side, and as soon as the parents cross over themselves, they'll all be reunited. So it's just a temporary absence. It's not sort of like a little girl's gone forever. We'll all be back together again soon. And because there is no linear time on the spirit side, a lifetime of a human, whether it be 6 years or 80 years, is just like a blink of an eye. So it's just a very temporary absence.
Well, I know we've talked about a lot. Were there other things that Albert revealed that were surprising to you?
I think we've probably covered most of them. I mean, I'd already, in a lot of cases, because of all my reading of spiritual books, or in many cases, I should say, I kind of thought I knew what the answer was before I asked the question, but Albert kind of reaffirmed it, and it was very, very comforting to me. The other thing that maybe I should point out is the crossing over process. I had said to Albert, well, that's very comforting for me to know that when I die, I'm going to go back to the spirit side and everything's going to be all okay. But I said to him, I've always had a concern about the death process, the physical dying part of it. And I said to him, will my physical death, will it be painful? Will it be distressful? Will I be suffering in the final moments? Like, how does that all work? And he said, no, it's actually a very pleasant experience. He said crossing over is uplifting and exhilarating. And he said, your soul will actually leave your body just moments before your physical death. So he said, if you're in a car accident that kills your physical body, your soul will actually leave your body just moments before the crash. So you won't feel the crash, you won't feel any pain, you won't feel any discomfort. And you'll actually be just outside of your body watching the final moments like you're watching a movie. And you'll actually, at that stage, just say, okay, well, I realize now that my body was just my shell here for my journey, and I no longer need this shell, and so it's discarded, and I'm going to go on to the spirit side. So he said, the crossing over process, once you sort of leave your body, you get taken by your spirit guides over to the other side, and you're met there by a really fantastic welcoming party. It'll be like your parents and your grandparents and your aunts and uncles that have passed over before, and other loved ones, and even your pets. And this welcoming party will just give you a big group warm hug, send you a bunch of unconditional love, and make you feel like you're glad to be home, which you will be.
So those near-death experiences, with the white light in the tunnel, any of that's, part of it?
Oh, sure, yeah. He said that most of us will experience sort of going through a tunnel after we leave our bodies, go through a tunnel, and you'll see a light at the end of the tunnel, and then you come out, and then there's your welcoming party, and you're sort of fully on the spirit side. So he said, yeah, those near-death experiences are very real, and they actually happen to those souls, and the difference is that the people who remember them have been given a special sort of a privilege of remembering their excursions to the spirit side to see their loved ones and whoever else they see, and there's lots of people who have near-death experiences that don't remember them after, but more and more people seem to be allowed to remember them and to write about them and report, to everyone else about what they saw. And that's just part of the spirit side, trying to get the message that Albert was giving me, get the message through to everyone in the world through various sources. So yes, they are very real.
So can we try to contact our spirit guide, or that's sort of against the rules?
Oh no, you can. Absolutely, you can. You're not going to probably be able to make a direct link like I have with Albert, but you can certainly be better able to listen to the messages from your guides by, well, meditation. Some people go to mediums and psychics and get hooked up to some degree with their spirit guides. So those are sort of the main ways, but it's not easy. It's not just like sort of, turning on your computer or putting your headset on and just start talking to them. You have to work at it a bit to get better communication links with your guides. But they're always there and they're always trying. And you know what? If you don't hear the messages and take a wrong turn, you shouldn't worry, because nothing that you do on Earth is for keeps. You're always going to end up back in the spirit side.
Okay. Well, Garnet, this has been really interesting. Is there anything else you think listeners should know that maybe I haven't thought to ask?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, I mean, it was really quite an enlightening experience for me, and I think that we've hit all the major points. There's obviously some more detail in my book, and if people want to hear more about what Albert has to say and some of the finer details, I recommend they read my book. But I think you and I have covered all the highlights. So,
in hindsight, what was the biggest impact having met Albert has had for you personally?
Well, the biggest impact was he just made me realize, like, I was still practicing law then, and he made me really reconsider where I was and where my next direction should be. And practicing law seemed to be kind of not the right way to go. So within a year after I met Albert, I retired. And then the next biggest impact was that because he told me I had to write this book, and I resisted at first because I had never thought I'd write a book, but he persisted. And so then the next big impact for me was to sort of put behind my legal career and put on my author's hat and start writing a book, and then finding a publisher, and then promoting it, and like I'm doing now by being on the radio shows. So it was really a big life change for me from being a lawyer to being an author. That's the biggest impact, I think.
Well, how did your family respond? Did they think you were a little wacko? I mean, did you get resistance?
No, actually, no, they were good. But, that was one of my biggest concerns, because after I first met Albert, I didn't tell anyone, not even my wife, for a couple of years. I was sort of mulling this over in my mind about, should I tell anyone? I could keep it a secret. I could write the book and then not ever show it to anyone. But eventually I thought, I need to just barge on. So I sort of in small spoonfuls told my wife, first of all, I was writing a book. And I just said it was about spiritual matters. And then as time went on, I kept on giving her more information about what it was about. And I had met Albert and so on. And she was really quite good about it. And she's actually a very spiritual person herself. She's very intuitive. So she had absolutely no problem with it. And I have two sons, and they were very good about it as well. So nobody, at least they didn't say to my face they thought I was crazy, but I really honestly think that they think that the course I'm on is a good one, and what I've written in my book makes sense, and they're all good with it.
So if I'm getting too personal here, just tell me, and tell me you don't want to answer, but, how do you go from a lawyer, which I'm sure, we all assume lawyers make a good income, to an author that, unless you're Stephen King or, J.C. Rowling or somebody, you don't make mega bucks. That had to be a huge cut and pay for you.
Oh, yeah. No, it was, yeah. And I knew that would be the case. But I wasn't too far away from retirement anyway. I was maybe I accelerated by a couple or 3 years, but
okay.
I knew that was the case. But it was something I knew I had to do, and if I could have just said, well, the heck with it, and I could still be practicing law. But I knew that if I was still practicing law, I could never write the book because I'd be too stressed out and too busy and too tired. Mm-hmm. So I'd never get there. So I knew that if I was going to write this book, I had to leave that all behind, and there's some sacrifices, but you know
right,
what?
Right.
You have to do what you have to do.
So what was your biggest relief, I guess? It will be my final question. What was the biggest sigh or aha moment in the whole, what was the most important thing to you that Albert told you?
he basically he said, I mean, his sort of final, we like to say his final parting words of advice he said, I take things too seriously and I need to lighten up. And he said that as much as I can, I have to remember that where I came from and why I'm here and where I'm going, and try to enjoy my journey. And that was sort of like, okay, that makes sense. I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing here, but I know I put myself here, and so I should try to make the best of it and try to think about what my soul wanted me to do when it was on the spirit side before I was born, and sort of try to live my life that way. And so I look at everything differently. I look at people differently. I look at animals differently. It's just been a real sort of life change for me from my practice of law, where I was very logical and analytical and skeptical, and I really quite like the change. And I think that that was sort of the big aha moment for me with Albert.
Right. I get that. Well, and I guess my last curiosity is, if the source isn't going to judge us for what we do here on Earth, it's just sort of our life plan, more or less, then why did Albert feel like it was so important for you to write this book? Because it really doesn't matter what we do here. Why does he care that we know what he imparted to you and wanted you to share, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Well, I think he wanted to help other humans understand sort of the way everything works, like where we came from and why we're here and where we're going. And if people can understand that, then Albert's thought was that people would be better able to embrace love and compassion in their lives instead of the negative emotions like fear and hate and anger and greed and so on. So his view was that if you understand that you create your own reality on this planet, it'll make it easier for you to accept, the good things along with, or the bad things along with the good things. And it would also encourage people to try to get in contact with their guides, try to listen to the messages, try to understand that there are messages coming for us, and that we should listen to them. And if we do that, we'll just have a happier life on Earth and a better experience. And we'll have less incarnations ahead of us if we can have a better life here now. And that's why he wanted to have his message spread. He's basically trying to help humans generally have a better life on Earth.
I see. Okay, fair enough. Well, Garnet, it's been really interesting. I'm glad we had this chat. It certainly piques the curiosity, and I think I'm going to start thinking more about trying to contact those spirit guides. I wonder if it's easier to do in your dreams, or was there any hints there about the best way to really, to be in contact with your spirit guide?
Well, he actually, our guides do send us messages in our dreams. It's a good point that you raised, and so, he says if you have a vivid dream, he said the best thing you can do is, as soon as you get up, is to write down what you've discovered in your dream or what your dream was about. And he said even though it may not make any sense to you initially, he says if you keep a journal of your dreams and then go back over it, a few times a year, he says the pieces will slowly start to fit together because the messages are very subtle. But, you can't really control your dreams, so all you can do is sort of monitor what you get in your dreams. In terms of other contact, meditation really is, he said that's the best way to hear your guides' messages. And there's many ways of meditating. There's hundreds of books written on how to meditate. He said it doesn't matter which way, because you should just choose the one that works best for you. But that's how you can better hear your guides and connect with them, is by slowing your mind down through meditation.
Okay. All right. Well, we have been chatting with Garnet Schulhauser, author of Dancing on a Stamp, and we've been discussing his spirit guide, Albert, a homeless man who appeared to him in disguise and revealed all of these important questions of life. So Garnet, when is part 2 coming out? Well,
I'm not sure. I've just started it, and I'm just going to start communicating more regularly with Albert, and I'm going to sort of leave it to Albert to say, okay, what else do you want people to know, Albert, and sort of take me by the hand and lead me where you want me to go. And so I can't really say when I'll be done, but I'm sorry?
Did he help you get a publisher? Did that sort of just fall into place real easily?
Well, actually, he didn't, because when I finished the manuscript for Dancing on a Stamp, I said, okay, Albert, you want me to get this? I wrote the book now. Who should I send it to? And he said, well, I'm not going to tell you who's going to publish it because that would be too easy. You have to go and do like every other new author. You have to send it, make submissions to a bunch of publishers, do your homework, find out who might like to publish the book. And so I did, and he wouldn't tell me who it was. So he did that very deliberately. He could have made it easy for me, but he said I needed to go through the experience of finding one. So he didn't. But anyway, I'm hopeful that my current publisher will publish my second one. Won't know until I submit the manuscript to them. But I'm targeting sometime in the next 6 to 8 months to have the manuscript done. But we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, good luck with it. And when it's out, please get back in touch with me and come back on the show because we want to hear part 2.
I'd love to. Yeah, thank you for inviting me on the show today.
All right. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you calling in early so that, it didn't get more complicated for me tonight.
No problem at all. My pleasure.
Okay. Good night.
Okay. Good night.